Hi, my name is Bilal Amin. I am a third-year medic at Robinson College, Cambridge, and you're watching Getting Personal with Team Upside. So for me, it was definitely the introduction. That was what I went through the most drafts for, and I completed that at the very end. It was sort of because when I was reading other people's personal statements in preparation for mine, I noticed that a lot of people would talk about a personal story or their work experience in their introduction and say how that was sort of like a springboard for them into like doing more research into what it is to be a doctor and medicine. But in my case, that wasn't true. I had always just been interested in becoming a doctor. Human biology is something that had always interested me, but I thought it was quite hard for me to say that and still grab the reader's attention because it's quite a bland thing. And essentially, in the end, I sort of said that the human body was a lifelong passion of mine and that it fused with another passion of mine, which was wanting to help people. And I just used a lot of adjectives and like interesting sentence structure to make that stand out. So for me, my school was definitely the biggest source of help because they dedicated extra time and resources to anyone applying to Oxbridge and or medicine. We had sort of a couple of personal statement sessions where we went over tips and looked at successful past personal statements. But regardless of whether or not your school offers that, you can still get a lot out of your school, because something that's important when you're writing your personal statement is getting a lot of other people to read it and getting a variety of other people to read it. So you can go to a subject-specific teacher for any academic parts of your personal statement, and then an English teacher for grammar, paragraphing, etc. And then just anyone else, like your form tutor, head of year, whoever, just try and get as many people to read it as possible, because they're all going to give you different feedback, and collectively you're going to have quite a lot of possible improvements for your personal statement. And I think it's also important to note that you don't have to follow all of that advice. I remember there were a few improvements I was given and that I actually didn't include into my personal statement because I didn't necessarily agree with those things. And I think doing that sometimes in moderation is important in order to keep your personal statement personal. So to figure out what structure was good, I mainly read other personal statements that were successful, and that was through like friends or family friends. And so eventually I settled on having an introduction, main body with 5 paragraphs, and then conclusion. And in each of the main body paragraphs, the sort of general structure I followed was something that I observed during my work experience, what that taught me about the qualities of a good doctor, and then either why I have those qualities or what I've done to develop those qualities. Yeah, because it's important to not just write about what you did on your work experience without reflecting. Universities are mostly concerned with what you actually took away from your experience. So I didn't have any specific big things that I did that would sort of just like be like, wow, and make my personal statement stand out. What I tried to do instead was make my personal statement less forgettable and more unique. And I did that in a way where I would sort of try and predict what other people would talk about. And then I'd ask myself, all right, so now how can I change that? So for example, if you know a lot of people are going to talk about diseases such as cancer, diabetes, arthritis, you should probably also include a rarer disease that other people aren't going to talk about, because A, that makes your personal statement a bit more unique, and B, it makes really good bait for interviewers to ask you more on. And so, yeah, just sort of little things like that where I would just add something that other people wouldn't necessarily talk about. Another example would be, I was like a computer science student at A-level as well. And so when I was talking about the need for doctors to have soft skills, I sort of tied in the possibility of AI and / robots taking over the medical field, and why that might not be possible because of the need for soft skills among doctors. Sort of like small things like that where other people probably aren't going to mention. So I think generally medical personal statements are quite balanced. I mean, you're probably going to have more experience than theoretical things, because that's what the majority of unis are looking for. And especially because you get interviewed by all medical unis, not just Oxford and Cambridge. So you always have the chance to elaborate further on like theoretical ideas or scientific ideas that you've mentioned. It's just important that you create that bait in your personal statement. So one of my favourite quotes from my personal statement is, "I attended a meeting on Gitelman syndrome where I was surprised to see even consultants learning about this rare disease. The fact that medicine is a constantly advancing field and that being a doctor is a lifelong challenge of learning appeals to me and is prominent in Roy Porter's Blood and Guts, A Short History of Medicine, which I have recently read." So lifelong learning is quite a key aspect of medicine. So it's important to show the reader that you're aware of that and you understand why that is. I used something that I saw in my work experience to show that I was aware of the challenge of constantly having to learn, and I sort of solidified my appreciation for that by mentioning the book, which talks about how medicine has progressed throughout history. And part of being a lifelong learner is keeping up with the latest advancements in medicine, which is why I mentioned the BMJ. It's a good idea to mention academic journals rather than sort of regular news articles, because scientific literature is what you're going to be reading and what you may be involved in later on as a doctor. But you might have noticed that I didn't explicitly say that I've read the BMJ, and that's because back when I was in sixth form, I didn't understand most of what was written in it. And so I only made an effort to sort of sit down and properly understand what one or two articles said so that I could bring them up later in an interview, which I think is probably the better way to go about things. There's no need to be reading super complicated and articles at the forefront of medicine at your stage. Nobody's quite expecting that from you. So it's okay that you don't understand those things. And another reason why I quite like this extract is because it's part of the paragraph that comes right after my introduction, and it sets me up quite nicely to prove my interest in medicine later on throughout my personal statement. I wrote somewhere between 10 and 15 drafts. I'm not sure if that's a lot or a little. I didn't really discuss it while I was doing it with other people. But yeah.